Well, thank you so much, all of you, for being here and your interest, and thank you so much, Enric, for joining us. Enric Sala, I think you have the greatest title in the world as the explorer in residence at National Geographic. It's like the thing that kids would want to grow up and be. So how do you become the explorer in residence at National Geographic?
Thank you for having me. First of all, it's an oxymoron, because explorers are not supposed to be in residence.
In residence, that's a good point. It doesn't work at all, actually.
Yeah. So I was a professor at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California. And my job was to conduct scientific research on the impacts of humans in the ocean, impacts of fishing, global warming, and write as many scientific papers as possible and publish them in academic journals. That's how you are promoted in academia. And one day I realized that all I was doing was writing the obituary of the ocean, with more data, more precision. And that day I decided to quit academia and dedicate myself to conservation. I felt like the doctor who's telling you how you're going to die with excruciating detail, but not offering a cure. So I said, forget it, I'm going to work on the cure. And I took a few months off to think about what I wanted to do. And I came up with this idea of going to vital ocean places and help to get them protected. So I knocked at the door of National Geographic Society, and I told them, hey, I have this idea. Let's go to the wildest places in the ocean. Let's get them protected, and let's combine what National Geographic is famous for, exploration and storytelling, with my research experience, and help to make sure these places are saved before it's too late. And that was the origin of the National Geographic Pristine Seas project.
That's so great. And how long have you been at it now?
15 years already. And we've been working with local communities, indigenous peoples, and governments to help create 27 of the largest marine protected areas in the world. And we're continuing, thanks greatly to your support, to the support of Bloomberg Philanthropies. So we'll continue pushing until 2030 to help achieve the global target of 30% of the ocean protected by then.
So I want to talk about that. We're here at Bloomberg Green at COP28, of course, and most of the attention and focus, rightly, is on solving the urgent problem of climate change. Bloomberg Philanthropies, along with many other philanthropic foundations, announced big new commitments on bringing oceans and climate closer together and supporting the advocacy and campaigning to make that happen. But why should people who are here, who are primarily focused on climate or energy transition, care about protecting the oceans, care about 30 by 30, care about the questions of biodiversity and nature?
Well, first of all, can I say something about how ridiculous it is that the ocean covers 70% of the planet? And if you go to the blue zone, the pavilion where the ocean, the building where the ocean pavilion is the farthest away. It takes 15 minutes walking from the entrance. And it's the tiny pavilion at the very end corner of the building. So the attention that is given to the ocean is really disproportionately low to its importance. Everybody sees the ocean as a victim of climate change. The ocean is warming, acidifying, but it can also be a solution. And I like to show one example, but everything that is good that we get from the ocean, food, oxygen, carbon sequestration, depends on marine life, from the microbes to the whales. It is microbes, bacteria, very small bacteria that we only discovered 30 years ago that produce 20% of all the oxygen that is produced on Earth. And it is all the animals in the ocean, like whales, like these sperm whales, that help sequester carbon in the ocean. And you have seen these whales. You have been in the water with these whales. And this is, I love to share this story. This is the government of Dominica in the Caribbean. 2 weeks ago, they announced the creation of the first sperm whale reserve in the world. This is an area where the threats to the whales are going to be eliminated. No ship traffic, because these whales are declining. This is a resident population of sperm whales, over 200 that live there. And when you jump in the water with these whales, the first thing they do is flight clicks, and this means I'm from Dominica. There are different families of whales, different clans that have different dialects, and this is the way they introduce themselves. And you can feel, you can feel these clicks on your bones. So it's incredible. These gentle giants, they are bigger than school buses. And the government has decided to create this reserve because the population is declining, and they want the population to bounce back. And they do something incredible for climate. They are mammals, so they have to breathe at the surface, but they go down 1,000 meters to hunt giant squid. They are down for one breath, 45 minutes. Total darkness. Can you imagine the epic fight of these giants and the squids? And we saw one sperm whale with a filament out of the mouth, and we thought, oh no, it's a fishing line. Actually, it was a giant squid tentacle. As long, it was the remainder of the meal, as long as the sperm whale. Okay, so the whale go down, eat giant squid, so that nutrients from the deep, they come to the surface, they breathe, they rest, and they defecate. And the whale poop, actually, is very rich in nutrients that they bring from the deep. It's rich in iron, it's rich in nitrogen. And that poop fertilizes the surface waters, and that creates blooms of plankton, these microscopic algae that live on the surface. And these microscopic algae, they are plants. They capture carbon dioxide from the water and the air, and they release oxygen. And they bloom when they are fertilized by the whales, and they capture a lot of carbon, and when they die, many of them sink to the deep sea with the carbon in it. So that's the way these whales help to capture carbon. And in the case of Dominica, these 250 whales sequester as much carbon every year as the equivalent of removing 6,000 cars out of the road, which globally, or for Dubai, is not much, but for a small island nation in the Caribbean, it's significant. So this is a way that marine life can help with climate benefits.
I feel confident that no one here thought they'd come into this session learning that whale poop is a important climate solution, but now you know, and you heard it here first. We read about so much bad news in oceans and climate. There was a study a couple years ago saying just based on the amount of plastic pollution in the ocean, each person eats a credit card's worth of plastic a week in their food. We hear about important ecosystems disappearing, the oceans heating, losing coral reefs. What are the real practical solutions you see, and what gives you hope?
Well, that's the good news. The bad news, I'm not going to repeat the bad news, everybody knows, but we are taking too much out of the ocean and using it as a toilet, basically. But the good news is that, and this is what we are working very closely with Bloomberg Philanthropies, is to scale solutions that work. And if we want to restore all the benefits that marine life gives us, we need to restore marine life. And the best way to restore marine life is not to kill it, right? Seems like an oxymoron, like a no-brainer, but still people debate how we should manage this and that, just really not thinking about efficient solutions. And what we work on is the marine protected areas where there is no fishing. Fishing is the last large-scale hunting operation on the planet. There is no harvesting in the ocean. We're just hunting fish. And we're killing them faster than they can reproduce. So areas with no fishing, no mining, no oil drilling, no development, areas where marine life can come back. And I want to show you an example, because images are better than words. This is a place in Mexico, in Cabo Pulmo. In the mid-90s, the local fishermen were so upset with not having enough fish to catch. They realized that it was because of their overfishing. So they decided to they partnered with some scientists, and they asked the Mexican government to create a no fishing area, a national park in the sea of 70 square kilometers. And we were there in 1999 to see what was there. And then we were planning to come back in the future to see how marine life would recover. As you can see, this is underwater desert. There is not much life there except for some encrusting sponges. You cannot see many fish there. So they closed the area to fishing, and we came back 10 years later, and this is what we saw. This is the same place. Before and after, the same place. We saw it come back from desert to pristine, a kaleidoscope of life and color. And even we saw the return of the large predators like sharks and jacks and groupers. And you know who else is thriving now? Those visionary fishermen, who now they make so much more money taking divers to see what they cannot see anywhere else in North America. And these places are tourism meccas. I come from the Mediterranean, from Spain, and there is one place, the Medas Islands Marine Reserve, is just 1 square kilometer protected. And that's 1 square kilometer protected maintains 200 jobs of people who take divers to see that marine life, and that generates 16 million euros. 1 square kilometer of sea generates 16 million euros. Not only it generates employment and economic revenue, but these fish in these reserves reach sizes, enormous sizes, that you cannot reach in anywhere else. If you keep fishing, it doesn't matter how well you manage it, you will never allow the fish to reach these big sizes. And these big females produce, they are huge, they produce a disproportionately large number of eggs. So they send eggs outside of the reserve, of the protected area, and they help to replenish the areas around. So actually what we have seen is that there is more fishing around these no-take areas now than before, when the fishermen were fishing all over the place. So this is like an investment account that, with a principal that we set aside, that grows with compound interest and produces these returns. So these areas are triple wins. And this is why we are so excited to work with you and our partners on these solutions, because they know it work. We know they work. We just need to scale them.
It's an amazing story that it's even with all the destructive activity that it can come back so powerfully.
Yes.
And your model with Pristine Seas is really a specific kind of campaigning, which is you inspire the decision makers to do the right thing, as you did in the case of Dominica. Can you say a little bit about how you do that?
Yes, well, when I was in academia, I thought that information, data, was all was needed for decision makers to make rational decisions, right? I was thinking like an economist. And then I realized that no, actually we need to touch the heart first. So we go to these places, and when we can, we bring country leaders with us. We have taken presidents and submarines. President Duque of Colombia, he's here, and he's telling everybody the story when he came with us to the coast of Colombia in the Pacific, got in our submarine, and he came out transformed. He said, wow, I had no idea about how powerful the sea is, how wonderful. We need to protect these places. And they went from 16% of their waters protected to 32%. They doubled their protection. And so first we want to make sure that the leaders and the local leaders also, local communities, they see the sea with different eyes. They fall in love with their seas. And when they fall in love with their seas and commit to protect them, then we come with scientific research, the economic research, the policy recommendation. But it's first heart and then the brain.
And what have been some of the cases that you've seen the most success?
The most success, Cabo Pulmo is one of them. We've worked with countries to create 27 of them. But there is one place that is really, really unique when it comes to protection yielding climate resilience. And this is the first place actually we went to with Pristine Seas, in the Southern Line Islands in Kiribati. Uninhabited islands, 5 uninhabited islands. This is in the middle of the Pacific between French Polynesia and Hawaii. We found this pristine coral reef. Most of the bottom was covered by live coral, sharks, lots of fish. And the government of Kiribati protected it in a no-take area, in a marine reserve. But in 2016, the Pacific experienced the strongest marine heat wave, the strongest El Nino year. And what happened in this pristine place? It was protected, nobody was fishing there, but a protected area cannot make the water cooler. Half of the corals died. So these are dead corals covered by encrusting algae. But we thought, well, it's a disaster that the most pristine coral reef archipelago has lost half of the corals over a summer. So this is the future for coral reefs. But we thought, well, this is the place with the highest biodiversity, the highest abundance of fish. If there is one place where biodiversity, where marine life can help a coral reef come back, it has to be this one. So we waited a few years. Of course, COVID made us wait. And in 2021, we came back to see what was happening, because nobody ever goes there. So it's a very remote place. And we had no idea if the reef was recovering or the reef was half dead or more than half dead. And I remember getting there the first day, jumping on our Zodiac. I was so afraid because we didn't know what we were going to find. And I remember my buddies were getting their tanks ready. I couldn't wait. I just jumped in the water, and this is what I saw. It had come back completely. It is the greatest coral recovery ever witnessed in the world. And we couldn't believe it. And the corals were growing faster than what anybody had seen anywhere else in the world. And why is that? Why did this reef, why these are super reefs, why these corals recover? Well, because it's protected and fish are off the charts. You have sharks, you have groupers, snappers, damselfish, and then the parrotfish that eat algae. So you have these big fish that you can find nowhere else that kept the dead coral skeletons clean, and that allowed the remaining corals to replenish the rest. So it is the fish that enables the corals to come back. It is the protection, the marine protected areas, that provide resilience, foster resilience for these coral reefs. So this is why, again, I think you can tell how excited I am about this. But it is the protection that yields resilience to climate. So we cannot, these areas allow us to buy time while we reduce emissions.
One of the things that we've worked on together is identifying the coral reefs that, the portfolio approach to coral reefs, the 50 reefs around the world that stand the best chance of withstanding the warming that's already happening in the ocean, and also that are geographically connected so they can repopulate the world's reefs as we stabilize climate. What sort of policy change or regulations do you need governments to do? Like, what was the key to success in this amazing case in the Southern Line Islands, which did, by the way, make the cover of National Geographic magazine with very beautiful pictures that everyone should look at?
In this case, well, there are several factors that influence the protection. In some cases, it's the economic argument, like in Cabo Pulmo or the Medes Islands in the Mediterranean, is the promise of tourism, which is realized pretty quickly. In other cases, is the increase in fisheries around it. In this case, and in other cases, it's the need to protect, the understanding by the leaders that they own something that nobody else does. These are very fragile places, very rare. And it is actually pride, because Kiribati is a country that you hear, oh, Kiribati, Tuvalu, these countries, they are going to disappear under the waves. They don't want to disappear under the waves. The government of Kiribati says, no, we want to be resilient. These are the most resilient coral reefs on the planet. This shows that the corals can keep up with sea level rise in these places if the fish biomass is so high, if the reefs are really, really protected. So this is really buying time. So it was a combination of the pride of having the most wonderful place in the ocean, but also, in this case, the climate resilience factor.
That's such an important point. I don't think people necessarily realize that connection, that if you get the government to set a marine protected area, allow the fish populations to come back, that helps the coral reefs stay healthy, regrow in the cases where they're bleached, and then that provides climate resilience for the structures on land in these places as well. Take a moment and tell us about your book.
Yes, during COVID, I published a book called The Nature of Nature. And I was planning all these book events, etc., and I couldn't do any because we were all locked down. But The Nature of Nature is my love letter to nature, is an attempt to explain to business leaders and country leaders and anybody interested in nature why we need all of nature. Why do we need all of the species, from microbes to whales, out there for our survivals and for our economy? and what's the link between also the pandemics, diseases, and our destruction of nature. So for me, it's like a crash course of ecology for bankers, for business leaders, for country leaders, for mayors, with stories showing why we need nature, why we cannot survive in a planet with all the species and as many individuals of each species.
That's great. So check it out, Nature of Nature by Dr. Enric Sala. Enric, thank you so much for your leadership and everything you're doing.
Thank you so much.